this idea out there that there's a different covenant that exists with Israel today than that which we see today. How many times have we heard the phrase, that was for Israel, or that was for the Jews, that was for them, that's not for me, the Sabbath is for them? And this is something that we need to take a look at, because this is the root of all misunderstandings today. If you don't understand the covenant that was given, first of all, to Abraham, and we don't understand the covenant that's been given to Israel, we don't have any understanding whatsoever. And I did a video on this once before, and it's a matter of problem and solution. We have to take a look at what the problem is and what the solution is to the problem. The two ideas of Christianity and Judaism, they're diametrically opposed. So we have to take a look at that. So this is going to be a series I'm going to do about the covenant and the issues and the problems we see today and dissect it. I'm going to take 1, 2, or 3 videos, however long it takes, and just explain the covenant as well as I possibly can using the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, and explaining that covenant that was given to Abraham and given to Israel, and where do we get these ideas that there's a different covenant that exists today than there was back when Israel was given it. Because we know that the covenant is forever. Judges chapter 2, verse 1, I will never break my covenant with you. He told us on Mount Sinai, you will be a kingdom of priests to me. All the earth is mine. So the covenant is forever, but we need to figure out what that covenant is. Everything begins with the covenant. Abraham was found tested and tried and faithful and obedient, and that is the reason why Abraham was given the promise that his seed will be as numerous as the stars of the heaven and as the sand of the sea. And not only that, but that his descendants would actually inherit the land of Canaan, which today we know as Israel. This is why we see the land fought over by Palestine and Israel today. And this is the whole center of the controversy that we see, in addition to the religious division that we see today between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. I encourage you to take your Bible and follow along with me. I'm going to post all the scriptures here on the screen, but I encourage you to use your own Bible and follow along with me. Look at Genesis chapter 22, verse 18. It says, "And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice." Genesis 26, verse 4 again says, "And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed." Genesis 28:14, "And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, and in thee and thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed." So we can see here, after looking at these verses, a couple things. One, the promise is that the seed of Abraham is not just singular, it is multiple. And why do we know that? Because he promises that the seed would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand of the sea. The second thing we got to look at and see is that because he was obedient to God's voice, he was given the promise that his descendants would be as numerous as the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky, but also that they would live in the land of Israel. What we see here is Paul actually will change the idea in the context of this verse. If we go over to Galatians chapter 3, I want to show you what Paul preaches that is in direct contradiction to what you just saw in these verses. And this right here is one of the causes that we have of today in the confusion. Galatians chapter 3, verse 16 says, "Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ."
What?
So we just saw 3 straight verses before we just saw the one that Paul just quoted, and that God says that his seed would be as numerous as the stars of the sky and as the sand of the earth. If you can count those things, so shall your seed be. But then we just read that Paul changed everything about that promise. He agrees that the promise was to Abraham, but what he does is he changes the context of that promise to say an exact contradiction, that the seed was made to one instead of many. Look at Galatians chapter 3, verse 29. It says, "And if you be Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise." Well, let's check the accuracy of that statement. We already know that the promise is made that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea. But what is the promise? The promise is that his descendants would receive the land. It had nothing to do with what Paul preaches, which is something to do with an afterlife. The promise was that the piece of real estate in the Middle East would be given to his descendants so that they could be a beacon of truth and righteousness to all the other nations and lead by example. This is the purpose of Israel, to bear glory to his name by doing his commandments and using that piece of land to do it. If you turn over to Genesis chapter 13, verse 14, it says, "And Jehovah said unto Abraham, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where you are northward, southward, eastward, westward. For all the land that you see, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if man can number the dust of the earth, then thy seed shall be numbered. So we can see here all questions are answered in this text right here. The promise is that his descendants would be as numerous as the sand of the sea and as the stars of the sky, of course, but also that those descendants would receive this piece of land forever. On the contrary, Paul is teaching that the promise is made to one single person that will stem from Abraham's loins that has nothing to do with the land, but actually giving life after death. This was never the actual promise that was given to Abraham. And this leaves a lot of questions for Christian viewers today, and that is, well, how do we get to heaven? And I know that's the problem that is being presented to the Christian audience and the Gentile audience, is that the problem is that we need to go to heaven. But God never gives such a problem. He wants Israel to teach the people in this world how to live properly, to know justice, to know righteousness, to bear glory to his name on this earth. You see, he didn't create the earth for no reason. He tells us himself that I didn't create the earth in vain. I created it for it to be inhabited. So it's a matter of problem and solution. If you understand the promises that were given to Abraham and to Israel and that covenant, then everything will become clearer. It all begins with that understanding. You have to know what that covenant was, what the purpose was, and what the blessings and the curses are that go hand in hand with that covenant. If we stray away from that understanding, that's when deception can rise in. The covenant that was given to Abraham is that the descendants would be as numerous as you could count. If you could count the sand of the sea or the stars of the sky, they'd be that numerous. The second thing you have to realize about the covenant given to Abraham is that that seed would inherit the land of Israel. Now, what's the covenant that was given to Israel itself? When Israel was taken out of the land of Egypt, God brought the people out of the land of Egypt with signs and wonders. He did 10 plagues to prove not only to the children of Israel and show his power and his might, but to Pharaoh himself, that there is no other God. Those 10 plagues were all judgments against the gods of Egypt at the time. I did another video on this before, but the lamb was one of the deities of Egypt at the time too, and that's why we slew the lamb at the time, because it was a proclamation to the people of Egypt at the time that we choose Jehovah as our God and we don't worship lambs. So I encourage you to watch the other video on that and explains it. It's one of my earlier videos that I did. But this covenant that was given to Israel is more or less as a marriage contract. It was written with the finger of God himself and wrote it on those 2 tablets of stone and put away, that it would be a memorial for all generations, that we should never forget the covenant, because he promises that he won't. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 23. It says, "Take heed unto yourself, lest you forget the covenant of Jehovah your God, which he made with you, and make a graven image or likeness of anything, which Jehovah thy God hath forbidden thee." Deuteronomy 4:31, "For Jehovah thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto thee." 2 Kings 17:38 says, "And the covenant that I have made with you, ye shall not forget, neither shall you fear other gods." Judges chapter 2, verse 1, "And an angel of Jehovah came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers, and said, I will never break my covenant with you." The covenant that is given to Israel, you have to understand that it is eternal. The whole purpose of God giving the land of Israel to the descendants of Abraham is so that they can be a beacon of truth and righteousness that bears glory to his name through keeping his commandments. This is what makes Israel a holy nation. See, if you're doing these commandments, then you are a peculiar people unto Jehovah. If you are doing his commandments, then you are a holy people to be a kingdom of priests that will bear glory to his name. This is the whole purpose of the covenant. You have to understand that God always rewards obedience. You can see it with Abraham when he was tested. He feared God and he was willing to give up his own son that God had given to him because he was found faithful and obedient. In the same way, the faithful and obedient remnant through Abraham's loins will inherit the land to show the world how to live through obedience and through faithfulness to this covenant that he gave at Mount Sinai. Now you have to also understand that this covenant that was given to the people of Israel is conditional upon that obedience. If we were to go and worship other gods while we were living in the land, he says that he will send us away from the land. What purpose do we fulfill as that beacon of truth if we don't keep his truth? If I'm going to be a representative of a company but not represent it well, I serve no purpose to that employer. It's the same way with Israel. If we're going to live in the land of Israel and worship other gods, then we don't serve a purpose. We can't be a beacon of truth if we don't obey the truth that was given to us. It is a marriage covenant. He tells us that he is married unto us. And when we go and worship other gods and we stray away from his commandments, he calls it whoring, or he calls it harlotry, he calls it adultery, because we are going and worshiping other gods. We are stepping outside of that marriage contract that he gave us. And this is why Israel is exiled from the land. This is what we are waiting for. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 29:24. It says, "Even all the nations shall say, Wherefore hath Jehovah done this unto this land? What meaneth the heat of this great anger? And then the men shall say, Because they have forsaken the covenant of Jehovah, God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them forth out of the land of Egypt. For they went and served other gods and worshipped them, gods whom they knew not, and whom he had not given unto them. And the anger of Jehovah was kindled against the land to bring upon all the curses that are written in this book. And Jehovah rooted them out of the land in anger and wrath and in indignation, and cast them into another land as it is this day." So it's pretty brutal. The provisions are right there in the covenant that were given us to on Mount Sinai. If we go and worship other gods, we'll be exiled from the land. And this is the predicament that we're in today. Now you see Israel today living in the land, but the full redemption has not taken place yet. Now, there is a provision once we're exiled from the land that we can go back to the land and fulfill the covenant that was given to us originally. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, directly following this passage in Deuteronomy 29. "And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and you shall call them to mind among all the nations whither Jehovah thy God hath driven thee, and thou shalt return unto Jehovah thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul. He will return thy captivity and have compassion on thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither Jehovah thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven unto the utmost parts of heaven, from thence will Jehovah thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And he will bring thee into the land that thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Jehovah will circumcise thine heart and the heart of thy seed to love Jehovah thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might, that thou mayest live. And then Jehovah thy God will put all these curses upon your enemies, on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee." You have to ask yourself, if the problem was that we were exiled from the land for worshiping other gods and forsaking the eternal covenant that he gave us, why does Christianity offer a solution to that problem in forsaking the law and forsaking his commandments and to worship another god? Does this make any sense? The very first commandment that we are given is, "I am Jehovah your God from the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me." But Christianity offers a solution that goes against this. It says to worship a God named Jesus. We have to make a decision at this point. We are either going to keep the covenant and come back to the land, or we're not. The very last instruction that is given in the Hebrew Scriptures, or the Old Testament as the church calls it today, is remember the law of Moses my servant. Look at Malachi chapter 4, verse 4, and it says, "Remember ye the law of Moses my servant, which he commanded him unto Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and the judgments." So you have to ask yourself, how is it that the Old Testament will end? The very last chapter of the Bible in the Old Testament reminds you to remember the law of Moses. The problem that we have is that we have worshipped other gods and abandoned the covenant that was given to us at Mount Sinai. The solution to the problem is if we go and obey that same covenant, he will bring us back to the land. See, what Christianity and the church is offering is another God to worship and forsaking the law. That's the very problem that we had in the first place. So you cannot give a solution to the problem that is the very problem in the first place. And I hope this makes sense. This is where the confusion and this is where the clash stems from, not understanding this covenant. In actuality, what God says himself is that our sin will be atoned for when we return back to him and cast away all the other idols. Look at Isaiah chapter 27, verse 9. "By this, therefore, shall the iniquity of Jacob be purged, and this is all the fruit to take away his sin, when he makes all the stones of the altar as chalk stones that are beaten in sunder, the groves and the images shall not stand up." So you can see here that the solution is that we just need to return back to him and his covenant, and he'll forgive our sin. We don't need a sacrifice. We don't need anything of that nature. Matter of fact, it says in Hosea chapter 3, verse 4, it says, "We shall dwell many days without a sacrifice or a king or anything, and then afterwards we will seek Jehovah our God, and we will return back to him." The problem stems, and I hope you get this, the problem stems from the fact that Paul is teaching to a Gentile audience. Let me repeat that. The problem stems from the fact that Paul is teaching to a Gentile audience that is ignorant of this understanding of the covenant. See, if you don't understand the covenant that was given to Abraham and it was given to Israel, and the purpose of that covenant to be a beacon of truth and righteousness, to bear glory to his name on this earth, then the deception can rise. He created this physical manifestation of his wisdom, and he gave the land of Israel so that the people of Israel would be that beacon of truth. Look at Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18. For thus saith Jehovah that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Jehovah, and there is none else. Right here in this verse, you can see the very purpose that God gives the land of Israel for. You see, we are not here so that we can pass through and figure out how to leave this earth and go on to another afterlife. I'm not debating and saying that there isn't an afterlife. What I am stating is that the purpose of this world and this earth is to learn righteousness and to ascend. This is our opportunity to ascend and learn righteousness. And what God is using is a nation, a righteous nation, a kingdom of priests that obeys his voice so that we can lead all the other nations to these truths and to ascend up and become a godly nation and become his children. You see, Israel is called the firstborn, and why is that? Because we are going to be the big brother that teaches all the other nations the truths that he was given to us on Mount Sinai. Isaiah 42 verse 6, it says, I, Jehovah, have called thee in righteousness, and I will hold thine hand, and I will keep thee, and I will give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles. This is the purpose of Israel, to be an obedient nation and the firstborn, to be able to do his commandments and do his covenant that he gave us, to be a spotless bride to him. If we don't do the commandments, we serve no purpose. And this is what I alluded to in another video about being an unprofitable servant or not. If we don't do his commandments, we are of no value to him. He told us at Mount Sinai, if you keep my commandments, you will be a peculiar people unto me, and you will be a kingdom of priests, for all the earth is mine. That's what he told us. Jesus also alluded to this very purpose of the people of Israel. Look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. It says, Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. You see, it's our actions that determines whether or not we are doers of the word or not. We were told to hear and to do, because if we are not doing what he says to do, we're unfruitful. We might as well just be a tree that's passed away and it's burned. This is the illusion that Jesus gave himself. We carry his name. We are called by his name, not by any other God. What God tells us is in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 7, it says, Even every one that is called by my name, I have created him for my glory. I have formed him, yea, I have made him. The whole purpose of humanity, God gives us in Ecclesiastes 12:3. Look at Ecclesiastes 12:13. It says, Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. You know, I look at news sources and they always say, what's the purpose of life? And this is a common question that you get in today's world and today's society, and that is, what's our purpose? What are we here for? If this is a creation, then there's a purpose for it. And that's true. Anything that you see in this world has a purpose. If it's something's created, it serves a purpose. The picture on your wall serves a purpose for decor. The food that you eat serves a purpose so that you can give nutrition back in your body so that you can survive. Everything that is created serves a purpose. If it does not serve a purpose, then you can say that there is no creator behind it. But we know that this world is created, and we know that Israel was created for the purpose to be a righteous nation, to guide all the other nations in truth and righteousness through obedience to his laws. So this ends part 1 of this series. Tune in on the next video so we can look at some of the other obstacles that are standing in the way of understanding the covenant. Is the covenant available to all? Is it exclusive only to the Jew or Israel? Or is it available to the Gentiles? And is there another covenant that is given to the Gentiles that's different to Israel? These are the things that we're going to examine in the next video. Tune in to part 2. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again on the next video. Let there be love.